Our youngest daughter was born into my hands. With the midwife's help, she slithered out of her mom and was placed in my hands. Being the first to welcome this little squirming soul into the world opened an intimate bond between father and newborn. Yet, as joyous, intense, and life-changing as that moment was, it paled in comparison to the incomprehensibly deep connection she shared with her mother. Laying her on her mom's breast and later, as she began to nurse, the sheer miracle of this overwhelmed me. How is this possible? This tiny new person seemed to be both her own independent being and yet one with the body of the mother from, of, and in which she came. How could these two be separate persons and yet this single, symbiotic being? Let's call that miracle the first intimacy. Every one of us has experienced being born, and what could be more intimate than arriving in the realm of time and space within the body of another person? There are many experiences of intimacy that we are granted in life. Sexual union comes to mind. No matter how exposed and vulnerable we might feel when nakedly entwined in mutual pleasure with a beloved, the shared intimacy of this draws us again and again into that merging. Love itself is intimacy, whether it be of the head over heels or any of its more enduring varieties. Love insists that we open to it, that we make ourselves available as nothing else in life does. As Khalil Gibran wrote, love threshes you to make you naked. And death. If you've ever held the hand of someone who was dying and, locking eyes in their final breaths, felt the shared soul of that moment, you may have experienced an intimacy beyond personhood, a oneness that feels almost cosmic. And in nature, who hasn't been stunned into silent at wonderment by a sunrise or a nighttime summer sky? The intimacy we feel in these experiences is sublimely human and yet utterly transcendent, grounding us in our personal realities while lifting us out of time into a wholeness that feels eternal. This is the gift of intimacy, the powerful reminder that we may be children of the earth, roaming the manifest world, but we are also immigrants from a homeland beyond. Experiences of intimacy can serve as portals to that beyond. These ordinary moments of extraordinary openness and surrender can take us from our physical humanity to our essential divinity, or, if you prefer, from the sensorial to the metaphysical. So it's not surprising, then, that in many spiritual traditions we find practices which help us to symbolically open and expand these portals of human intimacy. For example, Christ taught, unless you are born again, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. Spiritual awakening is often compared to rebirth in the teachings of the wise ones. In esoteric practice, this is not just a metaphor, but an actual process through which a functioning awareness of a deeper reality is born. That fresh, clear-hearted being is not just stated and birthed from a physical body. It comes through, of, and in the radiant awareness from which everything arises and to which it all returns. By being born again, the soul, taking up residence in that eternity, partakes fully in the power and perfection of its origin. In the Kama Sutra, an ancient Sanskrit text on sexuality, we hear that in the climax of lovemaking, there is a commingling of souls. This upwelling of mutual bliss both deepens and takes us beyond physical pleasure to an experience that is at once intensely personal and transpersonal. Ecstatic spiritual practices like chanting and dancing can bring us to a similar suspension of the self in a boundless joy. For many Sufis, the practice of zikr has the potential to invoke an embodied intimacy with the beloved, in which, as Rumi reminds us, there is no I and there is no thou. Death, that ultimate intimacy in which we no longer hold anything back, is seen in many traditions as both a sacred transition and a potent metaphor. From ancient times, prophets and philosophers have enjoined us to die before death, urging us to relinquish the petty concerns of the limited, contingent self and enter into the oneness of being. Sufis call this fana, the continual practice of that cessation. This is the last intimacy, the abiding reunion with the source and sustainer of all life. And it's miraculous in that it returns us to our perfect, undimensioned state while we are still individual beings. Like the babe at her mother's breast, in this ultimate unification, the Sufi is a fully autonomous self, free and joyful, yet completely trusting in and absolutely reliant on the beloved through, of, and in which she came from eternity to now.